When we talk about transformation, the very first thing we must address is the mind. Everything begins there. The human mind is both our greatest asset and our greatest liability, depending on how much control we exercise over it. Think about it. Every single decision you make, every action you take is born first as a thought. If you're not in command of your thoughts, you're essentially outsourcing control of your life to chance, circumstance, and other people's opinions. That's not living with intention. That's drifting. The mind is a meaning-making machine. It interprets reality, it frames situations, and it decides whether something is an obstacle or an opportunity. The same external event can feel like a devastating failure to one person and a valuable lesson to another, depending entirely on how her mind interprets it. This is why mindset is the foundation of everything else. You can't control the weather, you can't control the economy, you can't control how other people behave, but you can always control how you think about those things. That's the lever of power that is always within your reach. Philosophers and psychologists alike have known this for centuries. The Stoics taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, that events themselves don't disturb us, our judgment about them. Modern psychology reinforces the same truth. Our beliefs and mental frameworks shape our emotions, and our emotions drive our behavior. So if you want to change your behavior, if you want to live differently, you must begin with the inner architecture of your mind. But here's the catch. The mind does not naturally lean toward clarity and discipline. Left unchecked, it drifts toward negativity, distraction, and fear. That's because the brain's primary job is survival, not happiness. It's wired to notice threats, to replay past mistakes, to prepare for worst-case scenarios. If you don't take control of that mechanism, it will control you, which means cultivating awareness isn't optional. It's essential. So how do we begin to take control of the mind? The first step is noticing the conversation that's happening inside your head. You are talking to yourself all the time. Most of us just aren't conscious of it. When you catch that voice saying, "I'm not good enough," or "this will never work," pause and ask yourself, is that thought based on fact? Or is it simply a narrative I've repeated so often that I believe it? By disrupting the automatic loop, you create space to choose a different response. And in that space, you reclaim control. The second step is deliberately choosing the focus of your attention. Your mind is like a magnifying glass. Whatever you place it on will grow in importance. If you constantly focus on problems, you'll feel overwhelmed. If you focus on possibilities, you'll feel energized. This isn't about ignoring reality. It's about choosing which part of reality you allow to shape your emotions and actions. Attention is your most valuable resource. And control begins with learning where to place it. Finally, recognize that mindset is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Just as you train the body through repetition, you train the mind through consistent effort. Every time you challenge a limiting belief, every time you reframe a setback as a lesson, every time you choose gratitude over complaint, you strengthen your ability to control the mind. Over time, this practice compounds, and what once felt difficult becomes natural. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by how you think about what happens to you. Master the mind, and you master the foundation upon which every other transformation is built. Control your mindset, and you control your life. If controlling your mindset is about shaping the way you interpret the world, then controlling your habits is about shaping the way you engage with it. Habits are the bridge between intention and reality. They are the invisible architecture of our daily lives, and they determine far more about our future than any single burst of motivation or moment of inspiration ever will. In fact, if mindset is the seed, then habits are the soil. You can have all the right ideas in your head, but without the discipline of habit, ideas never take root. And what makes habits so powerful is that they operate largely beneath the surface. Most of what you do in a given day is not the result of conscious decision-making, but of automatic patterns you've repeated over time. You don't think about brushing your teeth, checking your phone, or the route you take to work. You simply do them. And this is both the danger and the opportunity. Because if your automatic behaviors are working against you, no amount of willpower in the short term will compensate. But if you deliberately design habits that support your goals, you create a system that carries you forward, even on the days when motivation is nowhere to be found. The philosophers used to talk about virtue as a kind of habit of the soul. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do, and therefore excellence is not an act, but a habit." In modern terms, this means your life is essentially the sum of your repeated actions. If you want to see your future, don't look at your dreams, look at your routines. The question then becomes, are your routines leading you toward growth, or are they quietly keeping you stuck? Here's the challenge. Habits compound, but we rarely notice it in real time. One skipped workout doesn't make you unhealthy. One impulse purchase doesn't put you in debt. One late night doesn't ruin your productivity. But repeated over weeks, months, and years, these small actions accumulate into life-defining outcomes. Conversely, one push-up, $1 saved, one page read, they seem insignificant in the moment. Yet, over time, they transform the trajectory of your life. The compounding effect of habit is unavoidable. The only choice you have is whether it compounds for you or against you. To control your habits, you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. That's why most people fail. They aim for massive change and collapse under the weight of unsustainable expectations. Real transformation comes from starting small and being consistent. A 5-minute meditation, a single paragraph written, a short walk after dinner. These are not dramatic acts, but they are symbolic. They're evidence to yourself that you are the kind of person who chooses growth. Once that identity begins to shift, the habits naturally expand. And this is the deeper truth. Habits are not just about what you do. They're about who you become. Every repeated action reinforces a sense of identity. When you say, "I go to the gym," that's a behavior. When you say, "I am someone who takes care of my health," that's identity. And it sticks. The strongest habits are the ones that flow from who you believe yourself to be. So when you think about control, ask yourself, what small, consistent actions am I allowing to define me? Because those actions are not trivial. They are the silent architects of your destiny. Control your habits, and you won't just change what you do. You'll change who you are becoming. If mindset is the foundation and habits are the structure, then emotions are the energy that fills the house we live in. They determine the quality of our experience. And while most people treat emotions as something that simply happens to them, the truth is, with awareness and practice, we can learn to control how we respond to them. That control doesn't mean suppression. It means mastery. It means using emotions as information, not as dictators. Think about it. Anger, fear, anxiety, excitement, these feelings often arrive without warning. They can be triggered by a word, a glance, a memory. And if we let them, they can hijack our behavior in ways that don't serve us. How many times have we said something in anger that we later regretted or avoided an opportunity because fear convinced us it wasn't safe? The emotion wasn't the problem. The problem was the lack of control in the moment. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. The Stoics believed emotions were not to be feared or avoided, but understood. They taught that we cannot control external events, but we can control our response to them. Modern psychology echoes this idea, showing that emotional intelligence, our ability to recognize, regulate, and channel emotions, predicts success and well-being more accurately than IQ. In other words, your capacity to control your emotions may matter more than your intelligence or your talent. But control here is not about cold rationality or becoming detached. Emotions are part of what makes us human. They're signals. Fear tells us to prepare. Anger points to injustice. Joy reinforces what we value. The key is not to silence these signals, but to interpret them wisely. That requires creating a pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, you decide whether to act impulsively or intentionally. That's where emotional control lives. One practical way to build this control is through reframing. Instead of labeling fear as a stop sign, you can see it as a signal of growth, an indication that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. Instead of seeing frustration as a wall, you can view it as a clue that something meaningful is at stake. This shift doesn't eliminate the emotion. It transforms its function. No, another way is through rituals that ground you in the present moment. Breathwork, journaling, even a simple walk. These practices create enough space between the emotion and your reaction for clarity to emerge. Over time, you become less reactive and more responsive. You begin to realize that emotions are not permanent states. They're passing weather systems. And just as you wouldn't build your identity on today's forecast, you don't need to build your decisions on temporary feelings. The great paradox of emotions is this. When you try to suppress them, they control you. When you acknowledge and channel them, you control them. It's not about being unfeeling, it's about being intentional. So remember this, the difference between a life driven by impulse and a life directed by purpose is emotional control. Master your emotions, and you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. If the mind shapes our perspective, habits shape our actions, and emotions shape our experience, then the final element that ties everything together is our environment. Because no matter how strong your mindset, how disciplined your habits, or how steady your emotions, if you place yourself in an environment that constantly pulls you in the opposite direction, eventually it will win. Human beings are profoundly influenced by what surrounds them. We are social creatures, wired to adapt to the people, places, and patterns in our immediate world, which means the environment you choose is not neutral. It's either lifting you up or holding you down. And think about how much of your behavior is not the result of conscious choice, but of cues in your environment. If the cookie jar is on the counter, you're more likely to eat it. If your phone is within reach, you're more likely to scroll. If you spend time around people who complain, you're more likely to join in. None of these actions were deliberate. They were simply defaults triggered by what surrounded you. This is why environment is so powerful. It shapes behavior without asking permission. Philosophers have long understood this as well. Confucius wrote that if you want to know a person's character, look at their friends. Modern behavioral science confirms the same truth. We become like the people we spend the most time with. Our aspirations, even our definitions of success, are influenced by the social norms of our environment. Which means, if you want to change your life, you don't just need to change what's inside you. You need to change what's around you. And this doesn't mean uprooting your entire world overnight. It means making intentional choices. If you want to think bigger, spend time with people who challenge your assumptions instead of reinforcing your limitations. If you want healthy routines, design your physical environment to make good decisions easier. Put the running shoes by the door, Stock your fridge with food that fuels you. Create a workspace that inspires. Focus. These are not cosmetic adjustments. They are structural. They reduce reliance on willpower and replace it with design. Okay? Here's the deeper truth. Your environment is not just external, it's internal. The books you read, the media you consume, the conversations you engage in, these are all part of the environment that is shaping you. Ask yourself, what am I feeding my mind every day? Because just like the body, the mind becomes what it consumes. Now, the beauty of this principle is that when you take control of your environment, you don't have to fight against yourself. Growth becomes the path of least resistance. Instead of battling temptation or constantly summoning motivation, you simply step into a world that nudges you in the right direction. So here's the question. Are you in an environment that reflects the life you want or the life you're trying to leave behind? Because no matter how strong you are, you cannot consistently rise above the environment you remain in. Control your environment, and you control the direction of your future